Wow, it's good to be here with you guys this morning. I don't live that far away. I live in Thorndale. So this is cool to be able to come here this morning and see a few people I know. I've known Chris for a long time. In fact, he gave me guitar lessons years ago. So we're going to start out by experiencing the psalm, Psalm 88. So please stand as we hear and resonate with this expression to God from Psalm 88. O Lord, God of my salvation, I cry out day and night before you. Let my prayer come before you. Incline your ear to my cry. For my soul is full of troubles, and my life draws near to Sheol. I'm counted among those who go down to the pit. I am a man who has no strength, like one set loose among the dead, like the slain that lie in the grave, like those whom you remember no more, for they are cut off from your hand. You have put me in the depths of the pit, in the regions dark and deep. Your wrath lies heavy upon me, and you overwhelm me with all your waves. You have caused my companions to shun me, and you have made me a horror to them. I am shut in, so that I cannot escape. My eye grows dim through sorrow. Every day I call upon you, Lord. I spread out my hands to you. Do you work wonders for the dead? Do the departed rise up to praise you? Is your steadfast love declared in the grave, or your faithfulness in Abaddon? Are your wonders known in the darkness, or your righteousness in the land of forgetfulness? But I, O Lord, cry to you. In the morning, my prayer comes before you. O Lord, why do you cast my soul away? Why do you hide your face from me? Afflicted and close to death from my youth up, I suffer your terrors. I am helpless. Your wrath has swept over me. Your dreadful assaults destroy me. They surround me like a flood all day long. They close in on me together. You have caused my beloved and my friend to shun me. My companions have become darkness. You may be seated. Despair. Whoa. You feel it this morning? Wow. What I wanted to do as we start is to notice for yourself your own emotional experience. So you can go as deep with me as you want in this, or not that deep if you're not ready for it. But I'm just going to invite you to do something. I want you to imagine for a moment, maybe something real, maybe just an idea of something, where you hear really bad news, or somebody says something really hard to you and pushes you away. Something really terrible. And I want you to just notice your body for a second. How does that feel in your body? Perhaps you feel it in your stomach. Perhaps hard to breathe, kind of tightness in your chest. And for something that feels really, really dreadful, maybe a dark, hard pain in the gut. Throw in some unrelenting pain, physical pain, feelings of abandonment. And then you're starting to get close to what this psalmist was expressing. I believe that this kind of despair comes from feelings fundamentally of disconnection. Disconnection from ourselves, disconnection from God, and certainly disconnection from other people. Often when I see really terrible despair, there's also a physical element, something physically that's hard, that's hurting in some way. And that emotional pain in the gut, when it sits there, it feels the same as if you have physical pain. And it's really tough when that physical, emotional pain is unrelenting. And so what happens in this space is you feel this disconnection. Sometimes we feel the actual physical pain of that space in despair. And you experience an absence of hope. A feeling as if I can't get past this. I can't survive this. It's too hard. It's just too hard. It's too hard to feel this. And so when we have that no hope, I want you to notice here for a second that the lack of hope in part is a feeling of real disconnection, of abandonment, of isolation. Many of us have little experiences of this. Maybe some of you have felt what I described, what the psalmist is describing, something more terrible, more extreme. And when we feel those things, when we share it with somebody, little sparks of hope emerge. We experience connection when the fundamental thing that I'm experiencing in the despair is disconnection. And so we need people we can talk to, not just who can nod their head, but who we can feel. We can feel that they're with us. We feel that they're listening and care and are able to be with us in what we're dealing with. So I want you to remember that despair needs to be heard. Okay, so that's kind of the first thing. Despair needs to be heard. It's a thing. It's a thing that people experience. I've experienced it. It needs to be heard. We need a presence to help us when we're feeling it. And then hope is something that we can't be told to have hope. You can't just say have hope to somebody who's in despair. They need to feel presence. This is why basic empathy is so important. But we actually need people with us in that space. I've experienced what I think of as a version of despair twice. Once when I was in high school, I was a sophomore. My parents had divorced right before my 8th grade year. My mother was suicidal. My dad was also, which I found out later. It was a tough couple years. I kind of held it together. And then my sophomore year, my mom was doing better. Some stuff stirred up around it. And I went into total despair. Pain in my gut. Couldn't do anything. Despairing. In that experience, I remember two things. One, my mom, despite her journey previously, showed up for me. And a friend of mine walked with me. I remember walking down the street and telling him the pain that I was in. And he just stayed with me. I also experienced physical despair. I had a surgery about 10 years ago that led to traumatic pain that actually led to significant memory loss. The pain was that bad. But I remember one day in particular where I was in tremendous levels of pain, and I remember despair. And my wife was with me, and I had one fleeting moment where I felt God's presence. I still remember it. I was holding on to the bed with my fingers, clamped. And then I could feel God with me. Just a little flash. I also remember my wife grabbing my shoulders and just going, I'm here with you. You can get through this. And it was her presence that I remember. Her physical presence with me. That she was in that space with me. So I share that story to help you relate to some stuff that I've experienced. I also had another experience where I was kind of in between positions, and I was looking for a position as an associate pastor. In fact, right before I came to Pennsylvania, this was 2007. And I got a phone call from the wife of a friend of mine, saying that her husband was in bad shape. And I showed up, started talking to him, and he said he had just finished his MDiv, as had I, and he said, God is dead on the operating table. And he was weeping and wailing. And I just would go visit him every week, basically just sitting with him, listening to him, and I would cry with him, and then I would try to pray with him. He wouldn't pray, but I would pray. I don't think anything I said was much help, because it didn't seem to help. But I do know that by God's mercy, about 6 months later, God came alive to him. I don't honestly know how, other than I know that myself, his wife, others were with him during that journey. And at the end of that dark night, he found the joy of the Lord, the presence of God, and he is now a lead pastor at a church. And you might say that's one of the little things that God did to show, in terms of, for me, what my calling to do this kind of work that I do. Honestly, it's an amazing gift and honor to be in the presence of people who need another presence. And the truth is that in these places in these stories that I've been talking about, my own and this one person, I could give you more stories, but basically, there were people there. There were people helping and present. So first of all, remember, our presence matters. We don't have to be the smartest person around. We don't have to be the wisest. What matters is our presence. And when we notice the psalmist, now I think he had people around, by the way, but he was saying I don't, okay? So his experience of what he wrote in this psalm was to say, I am completely alone. And so in this, you might have noticed, I'm sure, at the end of the psalm, he says, my companions have become darkness. Pretty stark, huh? It's like the only psalm, basically, where it doesn't end in some kind of refrain of hope. But God is with me. It's like, no, my companions are darkness. Pretty tough. So what's interesting about the psalm is, okay, so he basically wrote this thing, I think, in this place of total despair, right? And then in discerning with the community of worshipers, they decide that this is needed to be shared publicly. And so it's a public expression of his despair. He addresses it to God. He doesn't feel heard by God in it, but it's addressed to God. It's a public expression, so it helps us resonate with our own experiences of feelings like this, of experiences like this, feelings and experiences of disconnection. So I want to just mention some of the key movements. Okay? Some of the key movements. He does have faith in God. He declares God as my salvation. So he starts out by declaring his faith in God. But then he describes his life as one who has suffered as though dead. Okay? So he uses that metaphor of being dead is something we can relate to. It's a very poignant metaphor. When we're talking about emotions, metaphors are sometimes the only thing we can do to express it. And his metaphor is, I felt as though dead. Then he vents his anger at God. We can discuss whether we think God actually did all this, but to me, this is all hyperbole. He is doing what we do in our grief, which is we get mad at God. And guess what? That's pretty normal. It's not weird. It's normal. When people feel a lot of grief and loss, that they can feel anger at God. God is sovereign. So at some point, we often, many people will turn and say, God, I'm mad at you. Why did this happen? And he does this in dramatic fashion. He uses this metaphor of death to express the depth of his pain. He even recaps, God, I've been talking to you all this time, and you're not here. And then he kind of doubles down at the end and says, even the people close to me have left. It's hard. It's a hard psalm. I have used this psalm endlessly. In fact, this week I shared it with somebody who felt guilt for being angry at God. This week, shared the psalm. All of a sudden, you just feel the guilt lift and a connection to it be okay to stay with what he had suffered and then move through it, move to a place of hope. God's okay with us expressing our anger and our sadness, our confusion, our helplessness. He wants us to bring it to him. I think of this as God as the dad holding us and the kid, and we're just like, beating him on the chest. We don't, if you think about being that kid, something's happened that you don't understand, you're really mad about it. This is a big boy version of it. But God can hold it. He can hold us in this. In fact, he wants us to trust him enough to express even our hardest thoughts to him. And I also believe to bring it more broadly. So, I fundamentally believe that our emotions are important and good. Our hardest emotions have something important to say. They have something really important to say about our basic needs, about our wants, our desires. When we don't feel them and name them and move through them, do something with them, making choices about what we're experiencing, we disconnect with ourselves. So it's important for us to listen to and make sense of our emotions. Sometimes we feel shame about having hard emotions. Sometimes we feel guilty about having hard emotions. I was talking to my son about this yesterday. He said, "Dad, don't forget to talk about shame. Shame hides. Shame hides." In fact, I joked with him. I said, "Yeah, shame hid, so I didn't even mention it." So I'm mentioning it. Shame is this feeling like I can't be seen or I'm going to be rejected. If I share this part of me, I'm going to be seen as unworthy of love. And so shame hides, and it can hide our struggles. There's a whole host of reasons why. But it's important to honor what we're feeling. And it's important for us as listeners to not fix emotions. We don't resolve emotions with really smart thinking. We don't. Really distorted thinking can be helped by good thinking, and we do that all the time. I'm doing it right now. But the emotional space actually needs emotional presence for resolution. So you cannot tell somebody who's in despair to just have some hope. It just does not work. If you think about your own experience, you're going to be like, yeah, it don't work. And so, if there's anything you remember, that to me that's like, I'm kind of big on the heady stuff, and I'm also big on the emotional stuff, and I feel like I'm starting to learn the difference, This kind of deep emotion is hard to hold, I will admit. Really it is. When I was a kid, that year after my dad left, I'd be up late. My mom would come and stand in the door of my room and share all of her despair. Okay? Maybe God's used it, and I can give you lots of stories where I felt comfortable hearing despair that didn't seem so hard as that. But she shouldn't have done that, first of all. She needed adults to listen to her. I need to be allowed to be a kid. So kids, you don't need to solve your parents' stuff. Just going to say that. So this this place where we are addressing our emotion and listening to the emotion of others is to honor the emotions and to trust that God is at work. So I can't go into all the ways in which God is at work in this space, but just think about this for a second. What was Jesus doing when he came to earth? If it wasn't to bring about real connection through presence. If you look at his ministry, it's all about loving presence and healing and grace and holding, ministering to the physical suffering, ministering to the people isolated and disconnected. He's the one who is reconciled with us. God has sought us out. When we are followers of Christ, we do the same. We seek out the suffering. We seek out those who are hurting. We share with each other our pain and allow the presence, love, and grace of God to be there for us. So in 2 Corinthians 1:3, this great text, and I could spend a lot of time on this text, but I'm just going to read it. I'll read it again later. But 2 Corinthians 1:3 says, "Praise be to the God and Father of our Lord Jesus Christ, the Father of compassion and the God of all comfort, who comforts us in all our troubles, so that we can comfort those in any trouble with the comfort we ourselves receive from God." One of the things that we must realize is that our experience of God is most often experienced in the loving presence of another person who's bringing God's love to us. Sometimes we need, to pull away. We need to pray. We need to be with God. We need to express our hearts to God. But especially in these harder places, we really need the presence of other people. And in those places, we are invited to be reflective, so listen to people and reflect what we're hearing so they know they're heard. Don't judge them for loudness. You think the psalmist was loud? Very loud. The truth is, loudness is often hyperbole. We don't often think about that, but this is the worst day of my life. Is it really? Right? All the rational guys are like, I don't know. Right? And they're probably right. It's probably not the worst day. But it's hyperbole. It's an expression of a feeling of pain. Guess what? The more we feel unheard, the louder we get. So if you're loving somebody and they're getting louder, get more specific in what you're listening. Say more about what you're hearing. Reflect back. You don't even have to cry. Guys, you don't have to cry. Women who are, don't do emotion, you don't have to cry. Just reflect back what you're hearing. Help people to feel heard, that what they're saying matters, what they're feeling matters. And don't try to cheer up. Now, a good ice cream in a hard moment is really great. My wife especially loves ice cream, so it's good to bring ice cream when she's suffering. I tell you what. But don't try to cheer up. Don't say, just be happy. The more you listen to the hard stuff, guess what? The more they're going to smile after they tell you something harder. Okay? So you start to listen, they're going to be like, oh yeah, and it was really bad. And then you're going to go, yeah, really bad. And they're going to go, yeah, but thank you for being here. That was so nice. I love feeling your presence. Now, if you're the one struggling, I know this is so hard. Some of you may be stirred up by what we're talking about today. I'd be happy to talk to you. Talk to somebody you trust. Try to push past that shame, the anxiety, whatever is kind of making it hard. I know it's so hard sometimes. I've struggled many times when I had somebody else advocate, like that wife who said, hey, why don't you get help? Can I help you get help? It's really important. And it's impossible to talk about this particular subject of despair without mentioning the issue of suicide. It's a thing. I don't have time to go into all the issues. It's a tough topic right now. The truth is, we need to talk about it. It's actually not that unusual. It's fairly normal when we're feeling despair to have suicidal ideation. Why? I want to end this pain. Very simple. We can't be responsible to think that we can save people. When I was young, I did reach out to somebody who ended up taking their life. Crazy story. I wasn't responsible for what they chose to do. Okay? But our presence still mattered. My presence mattered. God helped me in that journey. He'll help you with whatever journey you're with, especially with somebody who's you loving, who's struggling. It's okay to ask. It doesn't make it worse. It's only helpful. Are you having dark thoughts? Have you ever thought about hurting yourself or others? Okay? It's normal to ask that. It's good to ask it. People are actually usually very open to talk about where they are with that. So since we can't go into all the details of that, I definitely encourage you, we can pull up the slide. Go to suicide.org. It's a really great resource. If you guys have your cell phones, take a picture, put those numbers in your cell phone. Be a good thing to have as a resource. It's important to have places to go. You can just call, you can just call 911 if you or somebody close to you is talking about actually doing something. I encourage you also, if you're feeling like ongoing depressive or anxious type of feelings that are impacting your life, you can also talk to your doctor, because there are lots of physical reasons why you may experience emotional depression or anxiety, okay? Just in my experience, low vitamin D created a low-level kind of depressive feeling, okay? So I'm mentioning that this stuff is important. I encourage you to consider even, if you're feeling some stuff, go to a doctor, go to a counselor. I work with a lot of Christians and Christian leaders. I'm not a therapist, but I will help people get what they need at various levels. So it's important, if you hear what my message is, for us to get help and to be comfortable being a person who can help others who are struggling. It's always good to share what you're noticing. I want to say a prayer. I want to pray a little bit about Jesus' presence to us in this, okay? So let's go ahead and turn to the Lord. And I'm going to talk a little bit in this prayer, asking Jesus to be present to us in this really tough topic and journey. All right, Lord. Lord Jesus, we know that you came to seek us in our struggle, in our disconnection, in our brokenness, in our sin, that you even experienced suffering and disconnection from the Father on the cross. You expressed that, and we know that you have led us as your people into a ministry of reconciliation, of compassion, of grace, of creating safe community. Lord, help us to see how each of us are loved by you, are in you in true and meaningful ways, that we belong to you. Lord, I pray for those who may be stirred up this morning, that you would minister to them, that you would meet their needs, and that you would help all of us to fully receive your love and grace this morning, to actually know the hope of the presence of your Spirit. Lord, to turn to you as the psalmist did, even in this most desperate place, that we could all turn to you in faith no matter where we are and share what we're feeling and trust you in the journey of being a loving place for others. We thank you that you have invited us into connection, and that connection leads to hope and a fullness of joy. So we pray that you would help us this morning as we turn to you now and reflect more on what you have invited us into. In Jesus' name, amen.